Jungle. Audio Jungle.
Thank you very much. I want to welcome you to this space. This is an advertised space, and I'm going to be talking to Mkoma or Dr. Tofa. The reason why we are going, to, excuse me, the reason why we are having this space is, you remember a couple of spaces, a few spaces ago, Dr. Tofa came through, and he wrote a piece, and that piece contains what he termed the 15 non-negotiable priorities for a possible Chiwenga presidency in Zimbabwe. So on that day that he tried, to speak about these things, I said to him, we do not have, the time to have that conversation. So would schedule a space. So I'm taking it from the assumption that um, with everything that we are seeing, I don't know whether that is going to be a reality or the time frame that we are talking about. There might be a possibility that if Chiwenga gets his way, he might take over from Emerson Mnangagwa. And we were of the view or of the understanding that with whatever it is that these guys, were doing, everything, that was happening in the last, few weeks, it was geared towards a possibility of a repeat of the 2017 thing, whereby there was an overwhelming support for the idea in 2017. But at the end of the day, the um, citizens ended up getting a raw deal. So what this is all about is, let's say we get to that scenario whereby there is citizen involvement in the next chapter. The last time we were just told come demonstrate, but when it mattered most, the involvement by the citizen ended w- when Mugabe, or ended when they were celebrating Mugabe leaving or Mugabe's resignation. That was it. Everything that happened after that, there was no citizen involvement. So this is where Dr. Tofa is coming in to say, if we are to relive that, we cannot just go there blindly. We need to put something on the table and tell them that these are our demands. This is what we want. These are our demands. So that is what he wants to talk about. So Dr. Tofa, I'm inviting you to make a request. I'll give you the opportunity to discuss those 15, and then after that, if there are any people that have any questions, they would engage with you, ask questions. But by and large, we are going to continue with our conversation as well. Yeah, the events, yaitika nasi, etc. But I mean, I just thought that because this is something that I'd advertised, and we need to really talk about it. So I'll give him the opportunity for him to speak to us, And then if we've got any questions, we will ask him, and we move on forward. And hopefully, I am anticipating that that would then feed into the developments that we have encountered now, or the developments that we have seen now, including today. So that is what I am going to do. So the person that I'm going to engage first is Dr. Moses Toffa. And the rest of you folks that are requesting, remember, don't go anywhere. Remember, Papo, I'll bring you into the conversation. Toisumudzira. Saka, if you can repost these, ladies and gentlemen, it will be very much appreciated. Toshimanya Nigitakadaro. Right, Dr. Moses Toffa, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you, Uncle Jed? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. I can hear you. How was your day?
It was hectic, and we are spending most of our time here on the space while also working on the other side. So, yeah, it has been a hectic day. How was yours?
Absolutely. No, mine was hectic.
I can imagine. I know you've been here for some
Uh,
hours.
yeah, mine has been hectic, this whole week. I'm trying to juggle my work, right now. I've got a document, that I need to complete by Monday, and Kurwara and all these things, is just something else. But anyway, enough of that. If you can greet our listeners, and then let's get into what you've got in store for us.
No, thank you, Uncle Jed. Let me start with thanking you and Titus for giving me the opportunity to share my views on this emotive and quite controversial subject. The spaces that you run, they are a great resource in terms of enhancing consciousness on governance and political issues. And I'm sure that when history is written in the future, a reference will be made to these spaces. If I were a political leader, I would surely have a lot to gain from the views that are shared on these spaces. So you are on the right side of history, and I can only say to you, onwards and upwards. I also, thank the audience, and I believe that you enrich this discussion with your insights. So today I want to talk about the 15 non-negotiable priorities for a possible Chuena presidency in Zimbabwe. And of course, Uncle Jed has already given background, so I don't want to go into detail with that. So this is not really a call to Zimbabwe to support General Chuena in the factional fight in ZANU-PF. My intention is to share my personal reflections on the demands that the citizens must put forward at such a critical time as we are facing as a nation. And what I hope to achieve is for us as a people to say that this is the roadmap, this is what we want as a nation. But before I go to those priorities, I want to share what I consider the fundamental pillars of Zimbabwe's political environment, which the change project must acknowledge, because my views are shaped or guided by these pillars. So the first pillar, of course, is that ZANU-PF is our problem incarnate as a nation. Our problem is not some individuals or groups within ZANU-PF. So removing certain individuals and replacing them with other individuals in ZANU-PF is not going to bring change to Zimbabwe, because the problem is the system. It is a systemic problem. When a problem gets to a position where it is systemic, it means that it is embedded in the system. So you need to actually overhaul the system in order to deal with that problem. So our problem is the system of ZANU-PF, and the solution is only in removing the system and not in replacing certain individuals within the system. We have to acknowledge that in the change agenda, and that each day that passes with ZANU-PF in power is an irreparable disinvestment in the future generations. But I also believe, Uncle Jed, that the transition to democratic politics in Zimbabwe may require some form of negotiations and concessions between the political, sides, or some elements within ZANU-PF. I believe that while ZANU-PF is not the solution to the, to the problems in Zimbabwe, but there's some form of negotiations and concessions and working together with either ZANU-PF or some elements within ZANU-PF, essentially to level the electoral playing field so that change can come through free and fair elections. So true change will come to Zimbabwe through a democratic transition of power from ZANU-PF to a competent and visionary government. That's pillar number one. The second pillar, which is related to the first pillar, because we are discussing about the possibility of General Chuena becoming the next president. I'm not saying in this presentation that General Chuena is a saint, neither is he a savior. He is one of the people who significantly contributed to the problems that we are having today as a nation, and that must be acknowledged and benchmarked. If, for example, you read a report by Knox Chitio titled "The Case for Security Sector Reform in Zimbabwe," you need to read that. It will give you a clear picture of the involvement of the army in Zimbabwean politics, especially since 2000. It gives you a clear picture of the operations that were carried by the army, most of them which coincided with elections, including Operation Chikorokoza Chapera, Operation Akudzokwi, Operation Makavotera Papi. You understand? We know what happened in the DRC. We know the 1st of August, 28 shootings. I think Chuena was, speaking very eloquently about these issues yesterday. We know the response to the January 2019 protests. We know how he threatened the doctors. We know what he said, Regerai Vakomana, Munozoeta Upenyumaremara. That cannot come from somebody who values democracy. Okay, so if General Chuena is to become president today, we may actually end up in a situation that is worse than we are today. That is something that is possible. I was talking to somebody who worked with him very closely, who was saying to me, I know you are going to speak about this issue, but what I'm telling you is that I know this man. I worked with him very closely. He is somebody who is worse off than President Mnangagwa in terms of tolerance, tolerating the opposition. So we cannot suppress, these issues. We have to put them, at the fore to say this is the kind of person we are talking about. He is not a clean person, right? In many ways. So I'm not here to paint him as a savior or a saint. And we may actually have a Zimbabwe which is more militarized if he is to become today's president. That's another pillar. So he's not a saint. The next pillar, of course, is that the 2030 or 2035 agenda is the greatest threat to the future of democratic politics in Zimbabwe. We are not a democracy. But at least the space that we have, 2030 or 2035, it is to succeed. It will take Zimbabwe down a tragic path that will take decades to reverse or to undo. So it is something that must be stopped by any means necessary. If it means that people who have different political persuasions but are opposed to this agenda have to, make some concessions and work together in order to stop this agenda. Let that be, because we are hearing scary stories about what is, being planned in terms of mutilating the constitution and promoting this agenda. It cannot be, obviously, even if the 2028 elections are going to go ahead, they will be fascist elections, but at least they must go ahead. Let the opposition say we are not going to participate, instead of having them cancelled in pursuit of the 2033 whatever agenda. We have difficult choices to make, Ango Jed. We are at a very tragic point where we have difficult choices to make. To say, do we want our country to go towards this direction or that direction? And don't tell me that those directions will be the same. They may have some similarities in terms of authoritarianism and other issues, but certainly one direction will be more tragic than the other. So we have a choice to say which direction do we want our country to take and which direction do we want to avoid most. That's the choice. Then the other pillar, Jed, is that the conventional processes of change will not bring change to Zimbabwe. I'm just focusing on the pillars that we have to acknowledge as we pursue the change project. We have talked so much about elections. Electoral reforms are not coming. Okay, and participating in the next election, if it is to come, will be just a way of legitimizing the ZANU-PF rule. The environment that we are in is not conducive for conventional politics. And let me say this for the umpteenth time, that it takes extra conventional methods and actors and processes to remove ZANU-PF, which are of course constitutional and not unconstitutional. So we need to be pragmatic. We need to think outside these conventional processes of change, because ours is an upset political environment where these processes cannot work. The last pillar, before then I go, I need to make my presentation within the shortest time possible. The last pillar is that the opposition's voice is currently, I think, at its weakest point. And I'm talking about opposition in its broad sense. Okay? The political parties that we have today, they are either heavily compromised or they are small and weak that they cannot effectively challenge ZANU-PF, particularly the 2030 agenda. Civil society is also weak, I think, at its weakest point since the 1980s. Jed, during the 1980s and 1990s, civil society in Zimbabwe used to be regarded by scholars as the de facto opposition in Zimbabwe, because in the absence of strong opposition, it was civil society that robustly demanded constitutional and electoral reforms in Zimbabwe. This is not the case today. So as the ZANU-PF succession battle is raging, the ideal thing for us to do as citizens is to speak with one voice and say that this is what we want, placing our demands, and say that we do not want either of the factions of ZANU-PF. We want a complete transition of power to democratic rule. That should be the message. That should be the voice. But unfortunately, that voice is not there. That is another benchmark. Okay, we don't have that voice today. We are polarized. I don't know. I know we are burning with the desire for change and everything else, but the voice is not consolidated. The voice is not there, unfortunately. So I am giving you this picture, Jed, and the listeners, so that we have an appreciation of the kind of atmosphere that we are in as we seek the change project. That's why I'm saying that we need to think outside the conventional processes of change. We need to think differently. We need to expect change to come from the least expected ways and sources.
Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.